Nightwing number 26, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Will Conrad and Cliff Richards. So, basically a whole new plot, but we are still in Chicago. We open up at a medical center, and Nightwing is telling us about this new element that was found called canium, and it's being used in this medical research stuff, and apparently it's an antipsychotic, but it's like super rare and barely any medical places have it. However, all the medical places that do have it have been robbed of it very recently, until finally there's just one left, which is this medical center we're opening up with. So we see a doctor picking up her prescription, and he's talking to the pharmacist and just like, oh, hey, where's Danielle today? And the pharmacist is like, oh, she got sick. So sucks getting sick when you work at a hospital, right? But tis. So the doctor walks away saying, oh yeah, give my best to Danielle. And we see the pharmacist has Danielle bound and gagged behind the counter. And so she takes Danielle's security card and says, all right, hey, it's almost over. Just stay right there. And she goes back. She takes all the canium or whatever out of the vault, I guess you would call it. And Nightwing says well, because people have been stolen, they've upped security. So there's no way she'd be able to leave out the front door. So I'm real curious to see how she's going to do this. And Nightwing sees that, or she goes out up the stairs to the roof, and Nightwing's like, and that's what I'm counting on, that she's got a creative exit. And he meets her up on the roof saying hey, rooftop getaway. Kind of sucks that I have to interrupt it because I really would have liked to see it. And then she just takes off. She starts running. And as she turns the corner, she sheds the wig and lab coat she was wearing, and Nightwing recognizes her. Turns out it's Mal. And if you don't remember, Mally. And if you don't remember who she was with Johnny Spade in the last arc, and she was talking to herself constantly. She has essentially some form of schizophrenia. And we see her doing a full cat burglar routine where she's jumping off of rooftops and she's landing on other ones. And she was called Mally the Mimic. And we see that basically as Nightwing's getting chased to her, she's watching his moves and is able to duplicate it near immediately. And Nightwing's like, okay, I get it. That's why she's a mimic. All right, whatever. So as she does one final jump, Nightwing manages to, he gets kicked in the face. And then she says, by the way, it's not Mally the Mimic anymore. Now I go by the name Marionette. To which Nightwing's like, cool. And as she jumps, he throws it's not a batarang, obviously, because it's Nightwing, but I don't have a better name. So batarang at her bag and manages to make it fall down onto the rooftop between them, where Nightwing's able to get to it first. So she doesn't have access to the drugs. So at that point, Nightwing heads back home, just being like, all right, well, after everything that happened in the last arc, I managed to convince my roommates that maybe we should get a 3-bedroom apartment to make it easier for me to sneak in. And as he struggles with the window, he finds that it's been locked, and he's like, oh, geez, are you kidding me? So he goes up to the roof, he gets his emergency clothes, he comes back down, and his roommate's like, oh, hey, you're up early, I didn't even know you left. And he's just like, yeah, totally. Hey, did you lock my window? By the way, did you go into my room? I left it open for a reason. She's like, yeah, I turned on the heat. I'm not about to waste heat because you want to have a little bit of a breeze when you're not here. And Nightwing's like, right, totally, thanks. And then we see the roommate also introduces this other girl who's there named Jen. She's a younger girl and is just apparently staying there on holiday because her mom works or something like that. We don't get a lot from her, but it does look like every time that Dick tries to make some sort of an excuse of hey, did you go in my room or whatnot? Jen's kind of gives a smirk, kind of oh, geez, this guy, huh? He's the worst roommate ever. So then we go back to Marionette. She's making her way into her own place. And as soon as she gets in, she's grabbed by 2 guys. And this guy says hey, you owe us money. Turns out that we know you're some sort of junkie because you got all these syringes here. So we're going to flush this all down the trash and make you watch. And she's like, no, you can't do that. And she fights against them, manages to crush one guy's windpipe and break another guy's arm. And then all of a sudden police are at the door. And she puts on a very convincing voice performance of oh, please help me. And then another voice she switches to is cut them all, slice off their fingers or whatnot. And we see as she scrambles to get one of these syringes. She injects it into her arm and escapes out the window as it seems to hit her pretty well. So at that point, we cut to Dick's new job. He's now working at a police bar, and all the cops come here and after work and talk, and his other roommate's just like, yeah, no, I got you this gig. It's real great. You'd be surprised the sort of things that the cops talk about and you could pick up around here. And Dick's like, I'm sure I will be. And then that one cop, Maxwell Morgan, who's, giving his other roommate a whole bunch of leads and whatnot, he comes in and he's basically like, yeah, we got this hit on this costume girl. She managed to break in and steal a bunch of the canium drugs, and we don't have anything else on her. And just like, okay, well, how do you know that she was in a costume? And Maxwell just like gives him a look and then basically walks out saying like, well, as long, print the story, see what you get. And Dick kind of questions that, being like, what was with the look? And he's like, yeah, he's kind of got this real thing for costume people. He really hates them. So if there's any sort of major crime or anything that he can turn into a costume thing, he tells me to print that story. And Dick's like, isn't that totally immoral and unethical? And he's like, yeah, well, I got to get a job, Dick. So at that point, we see later on Drexler Chemical, where there's a shipment of canium coming in, and Nightwing finds out about this and figures that Marionette would know about it as well. So as she breaks into the refrigeration unit, Nightwing's in there just being like, oh, we have to stop meeting like this. And we see Nightwing fighting against Marionette when all of a sudden a bunch of gunfire opens up, and Marionette's like, oh no, not him. And Nightwing says, not who, looks behind him. Turns out it's Mad Hatter, who has controlled a bunch of different people, including the detective and Michael, saying, oh, hey, please step away from her. She's my favorite Alice. So Marionette is part of Mad Hatter's thing, and she's an Alice, I guess. Sure. I like it. I like the reveal of this woman because we set her up before. We gave her a little bit of her own thing, and now she has become her own villain. It was a good setup payoff. My only thing is the Mad Hatter thing at the end. Like, I don't know. It just seems a bit too wanting to tell. Like, they're in Chicago. Mad Hatter should not be here, and I'm sure we'll get an explanation as to why he is here later, but it just seems like one of those things where editorial doesn't trust that we can engage with a villain that we don't already know. It has to be somebody who's already built up in the mythology. And I don't know. That seems a bit cheap to me. Beyond all that, it was a fine enough issue. It kind of just feels like a resetting the pieces sort of thing and seeing, okay, now we're starting a new arc. And let's see how Dick's now got this new job and they're living in this new apartment. There's this new person living with them. Like, it's just setting up new pieces for new exploration of the character. So overall, I'm going to give it a flat 7. It's good. It's not great. It's just above average. So I'll give it that, and we'll see what it does with the next issue.